Hey guys, tonight we are stepping back in time, not to a grand battlefield or a glittering royal court, but into a small, cold room in a place that's about to lose its mind. We're going to experience the Salem witch trials, but from a perspective you might not have considered before. We're putting you in the shoes of the very first person accused, an enslaved woman named Tituba. She was in an impossible situation, a true now-in scenario. And what we're going to explore is how, when faced with certain death, she might have fought back not with weapons, but with the only thing she had left to story. Honestly, if you were in her shoes, you probably wouldn't survive the first day. I know I wouldn't. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. It really does help the channel find other people who enjoy these quiet, late-night historical journeys. And while you're at it, let me know in the comments what city you're listening from and what time it is for you. I love seeing how this little community of ours spans across the globe, all settling in for the night. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first thing you notice is the cold. It's not just the sharp, biting cold of a New England winter in 1692, it's a different kind of cold. It's in the walls of this small, sparse house. It's in the stern, colorless clothes of the people you serve. It's in their eyes when they look at you, or often through you. This is the home of the Reverend Samuel Parris, the spiritual leader of Salem Village, and you are his property. The wind howls outside, a lonely, hungry sound that finds every crack in the wooden frame of the parsonage. You huddle closer to the hearth, the only real source of warmth in the entire house. The firelight dances, casting long, distorted shadows that writhe on the walls like troubled spirits. For everyone else here, these shadows might be a passing thought, a trick of the light. For you, they feel like company. You are a ghost in this house long before anyone whispers the word witch. Your days are a blur of repetitive, numbing tasks. You stoke the fire, knead the dense, heavy bread, mend worn-out woolens, and try to make yourself as small and unapproachable as possible. The world here is stripped of all color. It's a world of black, gray, and white, of stiff collars and even stiffer manners. There is no music, no loud laughter, no stories told just for the joy of it. There is only work, prayer, and the ever-present, silent judgment of God. It's a stark contrast to the world you remember, a place of vibrant sun, warm earth, and stories that danced in the air like hummingbirds. No one here knows or cares to ask where you really come from. Your husband, John Indian, who shares the strange bondage with you, is likely from a local tribe, but your own origins are a source of endless debate for future historians. Were you from a Caribbean island, maybe Barbados? Where you were purchased by Paris, did you carry with you the syncretic beliefs of Arawak or Carib peoples, mixed with the folk magic of enslaved Africans, or were you African yourself? Scholars still pick apart the fragments, examining shipping logs and personal letters. But the truth remains as murky as the bottom of a frozen pond. The very nature of your servitude is a hazy, grey area that historians still argue about. But for you, sitting by this fire, the academic distinctions don't matter. What matters is the cold, the silence, and the feeling of being a misplaced puzzle piece in a puzzle that despises you. You watch the Reverend's 9-year-old daughter, Betty, and his 11-year-old niece, Abigail Williams. They are like two tightly wound spools of thread, confined to this joyless house day in and day out. There are no real toys, no games to speak of. Their lives are a rigid cycle of chores, scripture, and silent obedience. You see the restlessness in their eyes, the desperate, unspoken boredom of children trapped in an adult somber world. Sometimes in the long, dark evenings when the wind is particularly loud and the work is finally done, they draw near the fire. They watch you. Their gazes are a mixture of childish curiosity and something else, something you can't quite name. They are drawn to you because you are different. You are the only splash of the unknown in their monochrome lives. They don't know it yet, and you certainly don't. But this small circle of warmth, here in the heart of the cold parsonage, is about to become the epicenter of a storm that will swallow their entire world. A different kind of storm is brewing right here by the warmth of the fire. And it all begins with the whispers of two bored little girls. The girls, Betty and Abigail, continue to watch you. Their curiosity at first feels like a small, warm stone in the palm of your hand, a rare moment of human connection in this cold place. You are their little secret, their portal to a world beyond sermons and samplers. In a house where every minute is accounted for and every thought is supposed to be turned towards God, you represent the tantalizingly forbidden. Fragments of folklore and song from a life they can't imagine. You see how they walked under the weight of their father and uncle's rigid piety. Their days are a monotonous loop. They wake in the frigid dark, say their prayers, eat their bland porridge, and then begin their chores. They are expected to be miniature adults, silent and solemn. But you see them for what they are, children, fizzing with an energy that has nowhere to go. They whisper in corners when they think no one is listening. They sometimes mimic the stiff gait of the church elders behind their backs, stifling giggles that sound like tiny, desperate rebellions. It starts innocently enough. On those long winter afternoons when the Reverend is away visiting his congregation, a small circle of other village girls begins to gather in the parish kitchen. It's the warmest room in the house, and you are there. They come under the guise of visiting Betty and Abigail, but they are all drawn to the same illicit thriller break from the relentless boredom. And you, perhaps out of a flicker of sympathy, perhaps out of your own loneliness, share things with them. Maybe you tell them a story from your homeland, a tale of cunning animals or mischievous spirits, something so different from their grim Bible stories that it feels like magic. And then, one of the girls asks a question that hangs in the air, a question that obsesses teenage girls in any century: who will I marry? This is where things get hazy, where the line between a game and a ritual begins to blur. The girls you learn have heard of little divination tricks, folk magic that has somehow survived even in this devout Puritan world. One of these is a crude form of scrying known as a Venus glass. It's a simple, childish thing. You crack an egg, letting the white drip into a glass of water. The shape the album forms is supposed to reveal the professional face of a future husband. Historians will later debate your exact role in this. Did you introduce them to this practice, drawing on your own cultural background, or did the girls already know of it and simply pull you into their circle, eager for an adult accomplice who wouldn't immediately report them? It's one of those questions lost to the silence of that kitchen. But one way or another, the egg is in the water. You watch as they crowd around the glass, their faces illuminated by the flickering firelight, their breath fogging the cold air. For a moment, it's just a game. It's giggles and whispers, a harmless way to pass a winter afternoon. They are peering into their futures, hoping to see a farmer, a blacksmith, a life beyond their parents' homes. But the thing about staring into the unknown is that you might not like what you see. One of the girls, maybe it's Abigail, maybe another, gasps. She doesn't see the outline of a handsome suitor. She sees, or claims to see, something else entirely. A shape that looks horrifiedly like a coffin. The air in the room changes instantly. The giggles die in their throats. The childish fun evaporates, replaced by a thick, creeping dread. A coffin. It's not a husband, it's a death sentence. The game is turned against them. The harmless magic has shown its teeth. They have knocked on a door, and something terrible has answered. This is the moment the seed of hysteria, planted in the fertile ground of their boredom and repression, begins to sprout. Betty Paris, the youngest, is the first to truly break. She starts to fall silent for long periods, then erupts into strange fits. She contorts her body into unnatural positions, hiding under furniture and making choked, guttural sounds. Abigail follows suit, her own behavior growing more and more erratic. They complain of being pinched and pricked by invisible needles. They stare into empty corners of the room and scream as if seeing something no one else can. You watch this transformation with a growing sense of unease. Is this an elaborate prank that has spun out of control? Are they genuinely terrified by what they believe they've unleashed, or is something else at play to this day? Scholars and psychologists argue over the cause. Was it a mass psychogenic illness? A shared delusion fueled by stress and fear? Was it adolescent rebellion manifesting in the only way it could in such a restrictive society, Some have even proposed a biological cause, like a fungus called ergot growing on the rye they used for bread, which can cause hallucinations and convulsions. The truth is, nobody knows for sure. But as you stand in that kitchen, watching Betty writhe on the floor while her father prays frantically over her, you don't need a diagnosis. You just feel the cold dread seeping from the floorboards. The private world of the kitchen has been breached. The screams have attracted attention, and very soon, a man of medicine will be called. A man who, when faced with something he cannot explain, will give their terror a name. The doctor arrives. His name is William Griggs, and HES, the local man of medicine. You watch him from the doorway, a silent observer as he enters the small, tense room where Betty Paris is now almost permanently confined. He carries a leather bag filled with the tools of his trade, jars of dried herbs, tinctures, and perhaps a lancet for bloodletting. He is a man of science, or what passes for science, in the late 17th century. He leans over Betty, who is thrashing on her bed, her eyes widened, unfocused. He feels her forehead for fever, checks her pulse, peers into her throat. He asks Reverend Parris a series of questions in a low, somber voice. Has she eaten anything unusual? Did she suffer a fall? Has there been any sickness in the house? The Reverend, his face a mask of anxious piety, answers them all. No, nothing. Dr. Griggs does the same for Abigail and the other girls who have now begun to show the same terrifying symptoms. They bark like dogs. They seem to lose the ability to speak, only to startle everyone with sudden, piercing shrieks. They complain of spectral bites and pinches, invisible torments that leave no marks on their skin. You see Drive. Griggs grow more and more perplexed. He tries a few remedies. A calming herbal tea, which Betty spits out with surprising force. A stern command to cease this behavior, which only sends Abigail into a more violent fit, her back arching unnaturally. He is running out of options. His medical knowledge, based on the theory of the four humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile, offers no explanation for this. The girls' bodies are not out of balance in any way he can identify. There is no fever, no rash. There is no fever, no rash, no swelling. He is a respected man in the community. He cannot simply admit that he doesn't know. To do so would be to admit failure, to show a crack in the authority of men like him. And so, after exhausting all the natural explanations he can think of, he turns to the supernatural. It's not a huge leap for him, or for anyone in this world. The devil is as real to these people as the winter snow. They believe he is an active agent in the world, constantly seeking to undermine God's kingdom on earth. Which isn't their malevolent deeds, aren't just fairy tales, they are a genuine theological and legal concern. The air they breathe is thick with stories of unseen forces. In a quiet, grave conversation with Reverend Parris, away from the girl's ears, Dr. Griggs delivers his diagnosis. He uses 3 words that will change everything, words that give an amen therefore a terrifying reality to the chaos. He says the girls are under an evil hand. The evil hand. It's a chillingly vague, yet powerful phrase. It confirms the community's deepest fears. This isn't a sickness of the body. It's a sickness of the soul, an affliction sent by a human agent working in concert with the devil. He doesn't name a culprit. He doesn't have to. His job is simply to point the finger at the cause, and the cause is witchcraft. His diagnosis is, in a strange way, a relief to people like Reverend Parris. An unknown illness is terrifying because it is random and meaningless. But an active witchcraft, that is something you can fight. It has a source. It has a perpetrator. It means there is an enemy to be found and defeated. The chaos now has a narrative. The news spreads through Salem village like a contagion itself. Whispers move from house to house, carried over fences and in the pews at the meeting house. The Paris girls are bewitched. The devil is walking among them. Fear, which had been a low hum in the background of their lives, is now a blaring trumpet call. Everyone begins to look at their neighbors with a new suspicion. The old woman who muttered to herself, the farmer whose cow had mysteriously died, the person who held a grudge over a property line. Suddenly, anyone could be the agent of the evil hand. You hear these whispers. You see the fear in the eyes of the villagers who come to the parsonage, ostensibly to offer prayers and support, but really to catch a glimpse of the afflicted girls, to witness the drama firsthand. Their presence only seems to make the girls' fits worse, as if they are feeding off the terrified attention. You stand by the fire, your hands busy with some mindless chore, but your mind is racing. Dr. Grigg's diagnosis has taken a private, domestic crisis and turned it into a public, spiritual war. He has, with his 3 little words, loaded a gun and placed it on the table. The only question now is who will be forced to pull the trigger, and who it will be pointed at. This is a fascinating point where history and science collide. Many modern historians and medical experts point to moments like this as a classic case of a community needing a tangible explanation for an inexplicable phenomenon. When medicine fails, folklore and fear rush in to fill the void. The idea that Dr. One is a cornerstone of understanding what happened next. He didn't create the belief in witches, but he gave it a formal, professional sanction. He medicalized the supernatural, and in doing so he made the hunt for a witch not just possible but necessary. And as you watch the growing panic, a cold knot forms in your stomach. You are an outsider. You are different, and in a town looking for a devil, the most different person is always the most vulnerable. The question hangs in the frigid air of every home in Salem village, who is the witch? It's a terrifying parlor game that no one wants to win. The community is a tinderbox of simmering resentments, old arguments over land, and plain old dislike. Now Dr. Grigg's diagnosis has thrown a match into the middle of it. The search is on. The pressure inside the Paris house becomes unbearable. It's the epicenter of the earthquake, and you are standing at its very heart, day and night. The house is filled with a rotating cast of neighbors, church elders, and morbidly curious onlookers. They gather in the main room, their faces etched with a mixture of fear and fascination, watching the afflicted girls. Betty lies in a near catatonic state while Abigail and the others writhe and scream, their performances growing more theatrical with every new arrival. They are the stars of a horrifying show, and their power is growing daily. These were girls with no voice, no agency. Now, they command the complete attention of every adult in the room. A single shriek from Abigail can make a grown man flinch. A pointed finger from another girl, Mercy Lewis, can cause a wave of nervous murmuring to ripple through the crowd. Reverend Paris, your master, is a man slowly coming apart at the seams. His authority is threatened, his family is afflicted, and his congregation is terrified. He spends hours in prayer, his voice a low, desperate drone. But his prayers bring no relief, so he turns from prayer to interrogation. He demands the girls name their tormentor. "Who is it that afflicts you, child?" he pleads with Betty, his voice strained. "Who is it that sends these specters to pinch and choke you?" But Betty is lost in her own world, so he turns to Abigail, his more volatile and articulate niece. "Abigail, ever the dramatist, rise on the floor. I cannot see. They will not let me see their face," she cries. "But they are there, a dark shape, a wicked woman." The adults in the room lean in, their faces grim. They offer suggestions. "Is it good wife so-and-so? The one who argued with you last market day? Is it the old widow who lives alone on the edge of the woods?" Each name is a new seed of suspicion planted in the fertile ground of fear. You try to stay invisible. You move through the crowded house like a shadow, fetching water, tending the fire, your face a blank mask. But you can feel their eyes on you. You are the only person in this house who is not a white Puritan. You speak with an accent they can't place. You are from a world they associate with heat, darkness, and paganism. You are by your very nature the easiest and most logical suspect. The girls, in their strange, feverish state, are highly suggestible. They are like sponges, soaking up the fear and suspicion that fills the room. When an adult mutters a name, one of the girls might suddenly cry out, as if that very person had just pinched her. It's a terrifying feedback loop. The adult's fear feeds the girl's accusations, and the girl's accusations confirm the adult's fear. There's a strange and uncomfortable historical debate here about the girls' motivations. Were they consciously manipulating the adults, enjoying their newfound power and settling old scores, or were they true believers in their own torment? Caught in a powerful group delusion, some historians lean towards the idea of fraud, pointing out how the accusations often conveniently targeted people the Paris or Putnam families had disputes with, seeing the girls as traumatized individuals acting out in the only way their culture would allow. The truth is likely a messy combination of both, a tangle of fear, power, and adolescent psychology that we can never fully unravel. You feel the net tightening. A glance from a neighbor lingers a second too long. A question from a church elder feels pointed. Tituba, have you seen anything unnatural, they might ask, their eyes boring into you. You know that any answer you give is wrong. If you say no, you're hiding something. If you say yes, what did you say? Yes, what did you see? Then the girls start describing the specter that torments them in more detail. They speak of a woman who tries to force them to sign the devil's book. They don't name you, not yet. But the descriptions are vague enough to fit anyone, unspecific enough to fit anyone, and specific enough to feel real. The tension in the house is a physical thing, a pressure building behind it. The girls are being pushed, relentlessly, to give the terror a name. Everyone needs a focal point for their fear, a face to put on the evil hand. You go about your chores, your hand steady but your heart pounding a frantic rhythm against your ribs. You know with a chilling certainty where this is heading. In a room full of people searching for a witch, the person who looks least like them is the most likely to be found. And in this small, cold house in Salem village, there is no one who looks less like them than you. The pointing finger is coming. It's only a matter of when. Just when you think the tension can't possibly get any higher, a neighbor named Mary Sibley decides to take matters into her own hands. She's a well-meaning but dangerously superstitious woman, and she has an idea. It's a folk remedy, a bit of counter-magic that has been whispered about in English villages for generations. She decides to bake a witch cake. The concept is both bizarre and deeply unsettling. Mary instructs her husband, John Indian, to help her. Perhaps she coerces him, or perhaps he, in his own fear and confusion, agrees. The recipe is simple and grotesque. You take rye meal and mix it with your own collected from the afflicted girls. You then bake this concoction into a small cake. The final crucial step is to feed the cake to a doll. The logic behind this, if you can call it that, is a form of sympathetic magic. The belief is that the witch is evil, her maleficence, is present in the bodies of her victims and therefore in their urine. By feeding the cake containing this essence to an animal, a familiar, it will somehow hurt the witch and force her to reveal herself. In their minds, the witch, magically linked to the dog through this ritual, would cry out in pain when the dog ate the cake, thus exposing her identity. You watch this entire proceeding with a sense of surreal horror. It's a desperate, foolish act, a piece of pagan ritual being performed in the heart of a Puritan community that professes to despise such things. It's a perfect example of the hypocrisy of the situation. To fight what they perceive as the devil's magic, they are willing to use another form of magic themselves. This paradox is something future historians will endlessly dissect, how a society so obsessed with doctrinal purity could be so steeped in folk superstition. Of course, the witch cake doesn't work. No spectral witch cries out in agony. The dog, a hapless victim in this whole affair, probably just gets a stomach ache. But the cake does have an effect, just not the one Mary Sibley intended. When Reverend Paris finds out what has happened in his own kitchen, he is livid. He storms into the room, his face dark with fury. From his perspective, this is an abomination. A pagan ritual, a form of magic, has been conducted under his roof to combat a spiritual ailment. In his sermon the following Sunday he denounces the act, calling it a diabolical scheme that uses the devil's tools to try to find the devil. He thunders from the pulpit that this act has only served to anger God further, and has likely escalated the demonic assault on the village. The witch cake fiasco backfires spectacularly. Instead of revealing a witch, it creates an intense, panicked need to assign blame. The community's attempt at a magical solution has failed, and in failing, has made them feel even more vulnerable. The pressure that was building behind the dam now has a massive crack in it. The situation is about to burst. And where does the blame for this diabolical cake fall? Not on Mary Sibley, a respected Puritan woman. Not on the other white neighbors who likely knew about it. It falls on you. Who else would know of such strange, dark hearts? Who else could have put this idea into their heads? You, the woman from another world, the keeper of strange stories. Even though you had nothing to do with it, you are the most logical scapegoat. Your very presence in that kitchen is used as evidence against you. The girls, hearing the adults' outrage and the furious whispers about diabolical magic, now have a specific target. Their vague descriptions of a dark shape begin to coalesce. Their tormentor, they start to whisper, looks an awful lot like Tituba. It's a classic case of what social scientists call scapegoating. When a community is under extreme stress and feels powerless, they often identify a person or a group as the source of their problems. By blaming the scapegoat, they create a false sense of control. You are the perfect scapegoat. You are powerless, you are an outsider, and now, thanks to a half-baked piece of magical folklore, you are associated with the very witchcraft they are trying to fight. The witch cake, a bizarre footnote in the history of the trials, is actually a crucial turning point. It's the catalyst that transforms vague suspicion into direct accusation. It's the moment the crushers settle directly on you. The girls, egged on by the adults' reaction and possibly by the Reverend's own pointed questions, are about to speak your name out loud. The question is no longer, who is the witch? The question has become, when will they say it's Tituba? You can feel it coming. The air is thick with it. The stage has been set, the audience is terrified, and the curtain is about to rise on the first act of the tragedy. And you have been cast as the villain. The breaking point arrives on a cold day at the end of February. The girls' afflictions have reached a fever pitch. Abigail Williams and Betty Paris are now joined by others, like Ann Putnam Jr. and Elizabeth Hubbard, fomented accusers. Their fits are no longer confined to the Paris household. They perform their agonies for anyone who will watch. On February 29th, 1692, arrest warrants are issued for 3 women. 3 names, finally spoken aloud, giving a face to the formless terror that has gripped the village. The first name is Sarah Good, a destitute, pipe-smoking beggar who wanders from house to house, often muttering curses when she has turned away. The second is Sarah Osborne, an elderly, bedridden woman who had become a local scandal by trying to disinherit her sons from a previous marriage. Both are easy target, social outcasts who are already disliked and distrusted. And then there is the third name. Your name, Tituba. The constable arrives at the parsonage. You see him from the window, a stout, grim-faced man named Joseph Herrick. The sight of him, the symbol of official authority, makes your blood run cold. There is nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. This is it. The moment you've been dreading. The accusation is read aloud. The girls, your daily companions, the children you've watched over, claim that your spectre, your ghostly shape, has been torturing them. They say you have appeared to them in the night, pinching them, pricking them with pins. They claim you have urged them to sign a book, the Devil's Book. Most damningly, they say you have sent your familiars, animal companions, given to you by the devil to do your evil bidding. The world seems to slow down. You can hear the crackle of the fire, the frantic breathing of Reverend Paris, the muffled sobbing of his wife. You look at Betty and Abigail. Betty is staring at the floor, but Abigail meets your gaze, her eyes wide and fervent. Is it malice you see, their fear? Is she a calculating liar or a terrified child, who genuinely believes what she's saying in this moment? It doesn't matter. Her words have become your reality. You are arrested along with Good and Osborne. The 3 of you are a strange trio, a perfect cross-section of Salem is underclass, the beggar, the recluse, and the slave. You are taken from the parsonage, the only home you've known in this cold land, and brought to the village meeting house for a preliminary examination. The meeting house is packed. It feels like the entire village has crammed inside, their faces a sea of pale, anxious curiosity. The air is thick with the smell of wet wool and nervous sweat. You are forced to stand before 2 magistrates, John Hawthorne and Jonathan Corwin. Hawthorne, in particular, is an imposing figure. He is an ancestor of the future novelist Nathaniel Hawthorne, who would later be so haunted by his family S role in these events that he would add a W to his name. Hathon is not an impartial judge, he is a prosecutor. He already believes you are guilty. His goal is not to find the truth, but to extract a confession. He begins with Sarah Good. What evil spirit have you familiarity with, he demands, his voice booming through the silent hall. Sarah, defiant and sharp-tongued, denies everything. I am falsely accused, she spits back. Her denial only makes her look more guilty in their eyes. They see it as the devil's pride. Then it's Sarah Osborne Estone. Frail and ill, she can barely stand. She too denies the charges, her voice weak but firm. She pleads her innocence, but it's no use. To them, she is simply another stubborn witch refusing to confess her sins. And then all eyes turn to you. Tituba, Hathon's voice rings out. What evil spirit have you familiarity with? This is the moment. The entire village is watching, waiting. The afflicted girls are in the front row, ready to scream and writhe at the appropriate cue. Reverend Paris, your master, is there, his reputation on the line. The magistrates are there, their minds already made up. You are standing at a crossroads. You see what happened to Sarah Good and Sarah Osborne. Their denials were met with scorn and disbelief. They were instantly condemned in the court of public opinion. You see the path of denial, and you see where it leads to a cold jail cell, a guilty verdict, and ultimately, the gallows. The historical record is grimly clear on this in the Salem trials. Not a single person who confessed was ever executed. The court's primary goal was to root out the devil's conspiracy, and a confessing witch who could name other witches was far more valuable to them alive than dead. It was a perverse incentive structure, a system that rewarded lying unpunished the truth. This strange loophole in their logic is something legal historians still find fascinating. It created a prisoner's dilemma of the most terrifying kind. To save yourself, you had to not only admit guilt but also implicate others. You stand there before the magistrates, the weight of every eye in the room pressing down on you. You can hear the wind howling outside, the same lonely sound you hear from the Paris hearth. But now it sounds like a warning. You have two choices. You can maintain your innocence, tell the truth that you are not a witch, and join Good and Osborne on the fast track to execution. Or you can do something else entirely. You can give them what they want. You can give them what they want. But the choice you make is more complex than a simple yes. You are about to make the most important decision of your life, a decision born not of guilt, but of a desperate, brilliant instinct to survive. You stand before the magistrates, the silence in the meeting house so heavy it feels like a physical weight. Hathon's question hangs in the air. Tituba, what evil spirit have you familiarity with? You look at the faces in the crowd, stern, fearful, hungry for a confession. You see the path of denial, a short, grim road that ends in a noose. And you know with a clarity that cuts through your fear that denial is death. This isn't just a gut feeling, it's a lesson you've learned firsthand. Before you were brought here, in the cold confines of the parsonage, Reverend Paris had conducted his own private, brutal interrogation. He had seen his authority crumbling, his daughter and niece tormented, and he had poured all of his fear and frustration onto you. He had demanded you confess. When you insisted on your innocence, his demands turned to threats, and his threats turned to violence. The historical records are sparse on the details, but later, you would recount your confession and state that your master had beaten you. He used his physical power, the absolute authority a master held over a slave, to try and force the words he wanted to hear from your mouth. You can still feel the sting of it, the chilling realization that your body was not your own, that your words were not your own. You learn it in that moment that your truth did not matter. The only thing that mattered was his truth. He wasn't seeking information, he was seeking confirmation of what he already believed. He needed you to be a witch, and he was willing to use pain to make it so. This brutal pre-interrogation is a crucial, often overlooked part of your story. It's what separates your case from those of Sarah Good and Sarah Osborne. They came to the examination with the naive belief that their innocence would protect them. You came with the certain knowledge that it would not. You had already seen the face of their justice, and it was the face of your master, contorted with rage, demanding a lie. So when John Hathon fixes his gaze on you, you don't see a judge. You see another version of Reverend Paris. You see a man who has already decided your guilt. You know that denying the charge will be seen as satanic pride. They will interpret your pleas of innocence as the devil speaking through you, trying to conceal his works. In this upside-down world, the only way to seem truthful is to lie. The Puritan legal system, especially in cases of witchcraft, was heavily biased toward confession. They believed that a witch's covenant with the devil was a form of treason against God. Like any treason, the best outcome for the state was for the traitor to confess, repent, and expose the entire conspiracy, and execute it, which was a victory, but a confessing which was a goldmine of information, a key that could unlock the devil's entire network in New England. This is why confessors were kept alive. They were too valuable as informants. It's a cruel paradox. The very people who proclaimed themselves to be guardians of absolute truth had created a system where the only rational choice was to tell a spectacular lie. Historians still grapple with the legal and ethical implications of this. It was a system designed to produce confessions, not to discern guilt or innocence. You look at Sarah Good, defiant and doomed. You look at Sarah Osborne, frail and doomed. You feel the cold seep into your bones, the memory of the Reverend's anger. You realize you are trapped. It's a cage made of their fear, their piety, and their absolute power over you. Trying to break the bars with the truth will only get you killed. But what if you don't break the bars? What if you find the key to the lock? The key is confession. The key is to stop fighting their narrative and instead take control of it. You take a breath. The silence stretches. The magistrates lean forward. The girls watch you. Their tormented act momentarily paused in anticipation. You make your choice. It's not a choice between might and wrong or truth and falsehood. It's a choice between life and death. You will live. And to live you must confess. But you will not just say yes. A simple confession might not be enough. It might be dismissed as something you're saying just to save your skin. No, if you're going to confess, you have to make it believable. You have to give them more than they ever expected. You have to tell them a story. You have to become the witch they want you to be. You open your mouth, and you begin to craft the lie that will save your life. The devil came to me, you say. Your voice is low, hesitant at first, as if you are afraid to speak the words. The entire meeting house leans in. This is what they've been waiting for. This is the breakthrough. You don't just say yes. You paint a picture. You start to weave a narrative, pulling threads from the bits and pieces of their beliefs you've absorbed during your time in the Paris household. You know what they fear. You've heard it in the Reverend's sermons, in the hushed conversations, in the prayers whispered over the afflicted girls. They fear the devil not as an abstract concept, but as a real, physical being who walks the earth. So, you give them one. He came to me and bid me serve him. You continue, your voice gaining a little more strength. You look at the magistrates, your eyes wide with what they take for terrified sincerity. You are no longer just a defendant, you are becoming a witness, a star witness in their war against Satan. Magistrate Harthan, sensing a major victory, presses you for details. This is the moment where your genius for survival truly ignites. A simple yes would have been the confession of a cornered animal. What you do next is the work of a storyteller, a strategist. You give them details so specific, so vivid, that they have to be true. What shape did he appear in? Harthan asks. You don't hesitate. You describe the devil not as some monstrous, horned beast from a European woodcut, but in a form they would recognize and fear. Sometimes like a hog and sometimes like a great black dog, you say. You're giving them tangible images, animals they might see on the edge of the woods, now imbued with a sinister new meaning. Then you add a master stroke. You tell them the devil was always a fearsome animal. You describe him appearing as a man. A tall man with white hair, wearing a black coat. This is brilliant. Why? Because it grounds the supernatural in the mundane. A tall man. It'd be a visitor from Boston. He could be a visitor from Boston. He could be a new neighbor. He could be standing in this very room. You've just made the devil feel incredibly terrifyingly close. This detail of the white-haired man in a black coat is fascinating to historians. Some argue it was a deliberate choice to deflect blame onto a mysterious outsider, while others wonder if you were utterly describing one of the powerful men in the village. It's a classic example of what scholars call strategic ambiguity. It was specific enough to be believable, but vague enough not to get you into immediate trouble for accusing a specific, powerful individual. The identity of this man in the black coat remains one of the great unsolved mysteries of your testimony. You can see the effect your words are having. The magistrates are scribbling furiously, trying to get every word down. The crowd is mesmerized, hanging on your every syllable. The afflicted girls have stopped their fits. They are watching you, their expressions a mixture of awe and fear. You have their dead attention. You realize in this moment that you have found a strange kind of power. Just an hour ago, you were a voiceless slave, a piece of property. Now you are the sole authority on the devil's operations in New England. You are the expert in the room. You have their ears, and you have their belief. You continue to build your story layer by layer. You tell them the devil promised you pretty things if you would serve him. This is another piece of psychological brilliance. It makes your temptation relatable. You aren't just evil for the sake of being evil. You were tempted, just as the Bible says Eve was tempted. It makes you a sinner, but a recognizably human one. And then you tell them what happened when you refused. He said he would cut off my head if I did not, you heard, your voice trembling. You've now positioned yourself as a victim, not just a perpetrator. You were coerced. You were threatened. This paints you in a more sympathetic light. You didn't eagerly join the devil's ranks, you were forced into it under threat of death. It's a narrative of reluctant participation, which is far more palatable to your Puritan audience than one of gleeful malice. You have made the single most important choice of your life. You have chosen to confess to lie, but it's not a simple lie. It's an intricate, carefully constructed performance. You are not just surrendering, you are seizing control. You are taking their fear, their beliefs, their expectations, and you are weaving them into a shield. You have stepped through the looking glass into their world of madness, and in doing so, you've just begun to write the rules of the game. Having secured their belief with the image of the devil as a threatening man in a black coat, you now add the masterstroke, the prop. You know these men, these Puritans. They are people of the book. Their entire world, their laws, their morality, it all comes from a book. They need tangible, physical evidence. A spectre is frightening, but a document is damning. He has a book, you say, your voice barely a whisper. He made me write my name in it. The room falls silent. This is it. This is the smoking gun. The idea of the devil's book was a well-established piece of European witchcraft lore. It was the ultimate symbol of a pact with Satan, a literal contract where a witch signed her soul away in exchange for power. For the magistrates, this is the concrete proof they've been searching for. The entire conspiracy can now be imagined as a list of names in a ledger, a diabolical census. What did this book look like? One of the magistrates asked, his pen poised. You describe it. It was a black book, you say, giving them the color they expect. But then you add details that make it feel real, details you are likely inventing on the spot. He carried it with him. He would bring it to me, and he would tell me he had more names to get. You tell them the names were written in red like blood. This visceral detail sends a shudder through the crowd. They can picture it now, a dark, leather-bound volume, its pages filled with signatures written in the blood of the damned. You have given their abstract fears a physical form. This is the birth of what will become the central obsession of the Salem trials. From this moment on, the magistrate's primary goal will be to discover the other names in that book. Your invention, born of a desperate need to make your confession believable, has just created the foundational myth of the entire crisis. You are not just a low-level witch anymore, you are a signatory, an insider. You have access to the devil's master plan. This elevates your status from a simple culprit to an invaluable informant. How impresses you? How many names did you see in the book? This is a dangerous question. If you say you don't know, you look uncooperative. If you give a number that's too small, the conspiracy seems minor. If you give one that's too big, it might seem unbelievable. You find a perfect middle ground, one that stokes their fear without pushing it into absurdity. I saw 9 names in the book, you say. 9 names. It's a terrifyingly specific number. Not a vague few or many. 9. You immediately account for 3 of them your own, Sarah Goods and Sarah Osborne S. This neatly confirms the court's suspicions about the other 2 accused women, lending your testimony immense weight. But it also means there are 6 other witches out there. 6 other signatories to the Devil's Pact, walking freely among them in Salem Village. You have just transformed a localized problem involving 3 social outcasts into a full-blown conspiracy. You've given the magistrates a quest to find the other 6. You've planted a seed of paranoia that will now sprout and spread, entangling more and more people. Historians often point to this moment, the invention of the Black Book with 9 names, as the point of no return for Salem. You provided the prosecutors with a framework, a plausible narrative of an organized satanic plot. You gave them a mission. Before your confession, they were dealing with the strange afflictions of a few girls. After your confession, they were battling a hidden enemy with a registered army. Your performance is flawless. You appear terrified, remorseful, and overwhelmed. You are playing the part of the repentant sinner, and they are buying it completely. The afflicted girls, who had been the center of attention, are now your supporting cast. Their screams and contortions now serve as confirmation of your story. When you mention a detail about how the devil's familiars torment them, one of the girls might let out a perfectly timed shriek, as if on cue, conducting a symphony of hysteria, and the girls are your orchestra. The introduction of the book is a stroke of storytelling genius. It's a simple, powerful image that everyone can understand. It transforms you from a mere pawn in their game to a player. You're still not the queen. Not by a long shot, but you've just promoted yourself from a pawn to a knight or a bishop. You can move in ways you couldn't before. You have given them a story, and now they will do everything in their power to prove that your story is true. The magistrates now have their conspiracy, their 9 names written in blood in a black book. But that's not enough. A list of names is one thing, but they need to know who those names belong to. The book is the theory, they need the conspirators. They need you, their star informant, to connect the dots. Who else did you see how their Ness voice is sharp, insistent? Who were the other names in the book? This is the most dangerous moment yet. Naming names is a definitive act. So far, you've talked about a man in a black coat, the black dog, a book. These are supernatural, spectral things. But naming a real person, a neighbor, is different. That is a direct accusation that will have immediate, real-world consequences. It's a line you likely don't want to cross. To accuse an innocent person of witchcraft feels like a terrible sin, even if it's to save your own life. You hesitate. You tell them you can't see the names clearly. The devil keeps the book shrouded, you explain. You are trying to be a good informant while avoiding the terrible responsibility of pointing a finger. But they are relentless. They don't want excuses, they want names. The pressure is immense. The magistrates, the reverend, the entire room is leaning on you. They interpret your hesitation not as moral reluctance, but as fear of the devil's retribution. They believe you are afraid to betray your new master, so they push harder. They must be in the book. Someone shouts from the crowd, name them. You are trapped. Your brilliant story has created a demand for more chapters, more villains. If you fail to provide them, the credibility of your entire confession could collapse, and with it, your only hope of survival. You have to give them something. So you do what you did before. You give them the people they already suspect. You confirm their own prejudices. Goody good and Goody Osborne, you say, your voice cracking. You name the other 2 women who were arrested with you, Sarah Good and Sarah Osborne. This is a strategically brilliant, if morally fraught move. You aren't adding new victims to the fire. You are simply throwing more fuel on the pyre that has already been built for them. They are already accused, already believed to be guilty by most people in the room. By naming them as your fellow signatories, you accomplish several things at once. First, you validate the magistrates' initial arrests. You make them look competent and discerning. You're telling them, yes, you were right to suspect these women. This makes them trust you more. Second, you solidify your own position as a credible witness. You're not just making wild accusations, you're confirming what is already known. Your testimony now seems to be the missing piece that ties everything together. Third, and most cynically, you are sacrificing to people who are almost certainly already doomed. Sarah Good with her angry muttering unsocial defiance, and Sarah Osborne with her scandalous inheritance disputes, stood no chance. Their fates were likely sealed the moment the warrants were issued. You are, in a grim sense, choosing the path of least resistance. This is a point where the ethics of your survival become incredibly murky. Did you doom them, or did you just read the room and see that their doom was a foregone conclusion? Historians who studied the testimonies note, but you never accused anyone who wasn't already a target of suspicion. Unlike some of the other accusers, particularly the afflicted girls, you didn't seem to invent victims out of whole cloth. You took the existing fears and suspicions of the community and wove them into your narrative. It was a form of reactive accusation, a reflection of the crowd's own prejudices. Whether this makes your actions more or less culpable is a question that still fuels debate. Your naming of Good and Osborne electrifies the room. It's the confirmation they craved. Now the conspiracy has a shape. It's you, the outsider who confessed, and these two troublesome local women. But what about the other 6 names in the book? The magistrates are not satisfied. They want more. Who else did you see with the devil? You revert to your earlier strategy. You describe specters and shapes, but you don't give them names. You tell them about other creatures, other apparitions who were present at witches' meeting. You are walking a tightrope, trying to feed their hunger for details without having to condemn another living soul. You have given them Good and Osborne. For now, that is enough to seal your value. You have proven yourself to be a cooperative, if terrified, witness. You've given them just enough to satisfy them for the moment, while holding back the rest. You have learned that in this new role information is power, and you are not going to give it all away at once. You've given the magistrates the black book into names they already wanted to hear. But your story is still missing something. It needs flavor. It needs the kind of strange, uncanny details that will stick in their minds and be repeated in horrified whispers over cottage fires. You need to make your tale not just believable, but unforgettable. So you draw upon the well of your own experiences and cultural memory, mixing it with the specific fears of your Puritan audience. You start to describe your travel arrangements with the devil. How did you get to the witches' meeting? A magistrate asks. They are picturing something sinister, something that defies the laws of God and nature. You do not disappoint them. You tell them you flew, not on a broomstick, not yet. That classic image will be solidified later. Your method of transport is stranger, more primal. You tell them you rode on a stick. Sometimes, you say, Sarah Good and Sarah Osborne would be with you, each riding their own stick or pole. You were taking a mundane object, a simple piece of wood, and turning it into a vessel of demonic power. It's a terrifying thought for them. Any stick lying in the woods could be a potential to love the devil. Then you add another character to your burgeoning fantasy, a bird. There was a little yellow bird, you say. You describe how this bird would perch on your shoulder and whisper in your ear. But this is no ordinary pet. It would tell me what to do, you explain. You claim the bird is a familiar, a demonic servant given to you by the man in the black coat. It pecks at you, you say, when you are slow to do the devil's work. The yellow bird is a stroke of pure, folkloric genius. Where did it come from? The historical record is silent on your exact origins, but many scholars believe you spent time in Barbados, an island with a rich blend of West African and indigenous Caribbean beliefs. In many of these traditions, animals, particularly birds, act as spiritual messengers, tricksters, or guides. It's a detail that feels authentic and deeply strange to your Puritan listeners. For them, it fits perfectly with their understanding of familiars, devils disguised as small animals, given to witches to carry out their evil deeds. This is a point of fascinating, though speculative, historical analysis. Are you consciously drawing on the folklore of your youth, translating the spirits and stories of your past into a language your captors can understand, or are you simply a brilliant improviser, grabbing at images that feel potent and strange? The answer is probably a mix of both. It's a phenomenon some academics call transculturation, where elements from one culture are adapted and reinterpreted within another, performing a live translation of your own cultural imagination into the vocabulary of Puritan demonology. You're not just confessing anymore, you're world building. You're creating a bestiary for their nightmares. You tell them about other creatures you saw with the devil. You describe hairy things that walk on two legs, and a creature with the head of a woman, but with wings and a tail. You are piling on details that are civic they couldn't possibly be made up, or so your audience believes. You can see the effect this is having. The afflicted girls who had previously just been complaining of vague pinches and pains now have a whole new script to work from. Soon, they too will start seeing a little yellow bird. They will shriek that Sarah Good's familiar is tormenting them. You are in real time, providing the raw material for the mass hysteria. Your private, desperate fiction is becoming their public, verifiable fact. The broomstick, the most famous symbol of witchcraft, makes its appearance in your testimony as well. You confirm their suspicions, telling them that yes, you have seen Goody Good and Goody Osborne gliding through the night sky on their poles. It's the final, perfect image. It taps directly into centuries of European folklore about witches' sabbaths and nocturnal flights. By the time your testimony is over for the day, you have given them a complete, self-contained universe of evil. It has a leader, the man in the black coat, a contract, the black book, a list of conspirators, the 9 names, a menagerie of demonic helpers, the yellow bird and other creatures, and even a method of transportation, the flying stick. It's a story so detailed, so internally consistent, and so terrifyingly imaginative that it overwhelms any doubt. You haven't just confessed to being a witch or to being a witch, confessed to being a witch to being a witch. You've written the definitive textbook on how witchcraft works in New England. And every word of it is designed to do one thing: keep you alive. Your confession is a sensation. The 3 days of your examination, from March 1st to March 3rd, become the talk of the entire Massachusetts Bay Colony. The official transcripts are copied and circulated, read aloud in taverns and homes. Your story, born of desperation in that crowded meeting house, becomes the authorized version of events. It is no longer just a story, it is truth. You are taken from the meeting house and locked away in a jail, probably in nearby Ipswich or Boston, since Salem Village didn't have a jail of its own. The conditions are grim. It's cold, dark, and filthy, but in a strange and perverse way. You are safer here than you have been in months. You have confessed. You have a cooperating witness. As long as you stick to your story and continue to provide information, you will not be sent to the gallows. You have traded your freedom for your life. Back in Salem, your testimony has a catastrophic effect. It acts as an accelerant, turning a sputtering fire into a raging inferno. The afflicted girls who had been your audience now become your imitators and collaborators. They absorb the details of your story and incorporate them into their own performances. Suddenly, and Putnam Jr. is not just being pinched by an invisible spectre, she's being tormented by a little yellow bird, just like the one you described. Mercy Lewis shrieks that she can see Sarah Good's name in the Devil's Black Book, its letters glowing red. The girl's visions become more detailed, more specific, and more aligned with the narrative you created. You have, unwittingly or not, given them a shared language of hallucination. Before your testimony, their torments were relatively generic. Now, they have a specific cast of characters and a set of props to work with. The black book, the yellow bird, the man in the black coat, these become recurring motifs in all their accusations. This phenomenon, where one person's detailed account shapes the delusions of a group, is something psychologists have a name for: folia plusieurs, or the madness of many. Your story became the template. It was so compelling, so vivid that it began to shape what others genuinely believed they were seeing and experiencing. The line between performance and genuine delusion, already blurry, was now erased completely. You also handed the magistrates their most powerful and controversial legal tool: spectral evidence. The idea that a witch could send her spectre, or spirit shape, to harm someone from a distance was central to your confession. You claimed that the spectres of Sarah Good and Sarah Osborne came to you, that you flew with them. By accepting your confession as truth, the court, led by the zealous Deputy Governor William Stoughton, formally accepted the legality of spectral evidence. This was a legal disaster. It meant that a person could be accused and even condemned based on nothing more than a victim's claim that they saw the accused's ghost hurting them. How could you possibly prove that your spirit wasn't somewhere tormenting a young girl? It was an unfalsifiable charge. Your desperate lie, intended to save your own life, had just dismantled the basic legal rights of every other person in the colony. Historians still debate the legal thinking behind this. While some hardline Puritans like Corton Mather had written about spectral evidence before, its full-throated acceptance at the Salem trials was unprecedented. It was a departure from standard English legal practice at the time, which was growing more skeptical of such claims. The magistrates of Salem, fueled by your story, took a huge leap into a legal grey area, and in doing so, they opened the floodgates. From the relative quiet of your cell you hear the news. The accusations are multiplying. Your 6 unnamed co-conspirators are being found. The net is widening, moving beyond the initial circle of social outcasts. A respectable, church-going woman named Martha Curry is accused after she publicly questions the truthfulness of the afflicted girls. Then a 4-year-old child, Dorcas Good, daughter of Sarah Good, is accused and confesses, likely after days of terrifying interrogation, to being a witch herself. You have become the ultimate authority, the patient zero of the entire epidemic. Your testimony is the bedrock upon which all subsequent accusations are built. When a new person is accused, the magistrates look for connections back to your story. Does the accused own a pet that could be a familiar? Did they ever wear a black coat? Your fiction has become the reference manual for the witch hunt. You are now the primary source, the oracle. You are now the primary source, the oracle, the one who saw the devil first and lived to tell the tale. The truth of what is happening in Salem is now whatever you say it is. In the dim, damp confines of your jail cell, a strange and unsettling new reality begins to sink in. You, who have been voiceless your entire life, suddenly possess the most powerful voice in Massachusetts. You, a woman with no rights, no property, no legal standing, have become the architect of the colony's greatest crisis. Word of your testimony has spread like wildfire. Magistrates, ministers, and concerned gentlemen travel to your Boston jail cell to hear the story from your own lips. They don't see you as a prisoner. They see you as a key, a guide into the darkness that has enveloped their world. They bring you food, perhaps better food than you ever ate at the parsonage. They speak to you with a kind of deferential awe. When they ask you questions, you continue to elaborate on your story. Each retelling adds another layer of detail, another brushstroke on the canvas of your terrifying masterpiece. You describe the witches' Sabbath, the unholy communion where they ate red bread and drank red wine, a blasphemous parody of the Puritans' sacrament. This detail is particularly horrifying to them, a direct assault on the very center of their faith. The afflicted girls, meanwhile, are continuing their terrible work back in Salem. They have become local celebrities. The tragic tormentors are now inextricably linked to you. When they accuse someone new, their testimony often includes a line like, "And Tituba was there with her," or "Tituba's spectre told me that Goody Proctor was a witch." You have become a spectral cosigner for every new accusation. Your ghostly image, as described by the girls, is seen at every diabolical meeting, confirming the guilt of each new suspect. Your name is the stamp of authenticity. If Tituba's ghost was there, it must be true. It's a bizarre form of power. You are physically locked away, but your spectre is running wild all over Essex County. You are simultaneously powerless and omnipotent. This paradox is at the very heart of your strange new role. You have no control over your own body, which is legally the property of Samuel Paris and can be sold at his whim. But your story, your words now have the power to condemn the most respected members of the community. You hear about the accusation of Rebecca Nurse. This is a shock to the whole community. Rebecca is a 71-year-old woman, pious, respected, and known for her charity. She is the opposite of the marginalized women first accused. Her arrest signals a terrifying new phase of the crisis. No one is safe. When Rebecca Nurse is examined, the girls put on a spectacular performance, writhing and choking in her presence. And of course, they claim that your spectre was there too, helping Goody Nurse to torment them. The magistrates are now completely under the spell of your narrative. They see everything through the lens you created. When a defendant like Martha Corey laughs in disbelief at the accusations, they don't see an innocent woman's rational response. They see a brazen witch showing her contempt for the court, just as you described the devil's arrogance. When a suspect stands firm in their denial, they see the devil's pride, the refusal to break the pact you told them about. Your testimony has created a closed loop of logic. Any action a suspect takes can be interpreted as proof of their guilt. Denial is pride, silence is cunning. Anger is aggression. A calm demeanor is the cold composure of a practiced liar. There is no way out of the trap you have inadvertently helped to build. This is a classic feature of what historians and sociologists call a moral panic. The accused is stripped of their individuality and forced into a predefined role, in this case the witch. Their actual personality and history become irrelevant. All that matters is how well they fit the script. You sit in your cell, the unwilling oracle of Salem. Do you feel a sense of guilt, a sense of terror at what you've unleashed, or is there a small, dark part of you that feels a sliver of satisfaction? These people, who saw you as less than human, now hang on your every word. Their entire world is shaking, and you are the one causing the tremors. The nature of your power is complex and has been a subject of deep historical debate. Some see you purely as a victim, forced to create this story to survive. Others see a more active agent, a woman who, finding herself in an impossible situation, cleverly manipulated her captors' beliefs to gain a measure of control over her own fate. The truth, as always, is likely somewhere in the messy human middle. You are both victim and, in a strange, limited way, victor. But you have saved your life and, in the process, turned their world upside down. You've provided the plot, the characters, and the setting. Now your confession becomes something more, a blueprint. It's a step-by-step guide for both the accusers and the accused. It lays out a clear, repeatable pattern that will dominate the dozens of examinations and trials to come. For the magistrates, your testimony provides the perfect interrogation script. Their questions to subsequent suspects are no longer open-ended inquiries. They are leading questions designed to elicit confirmations of your story. They don't ask, "Did you see anything strange?" They ask, "Did the man in the black coat visit you? Did you see the yellow bird? Did you sign the book?" They are not investigating, they are trying to fit new pieces into the puzzle you designed. For the afflicted girls, your story is a well of endless inspiration. Their accusations become more uniform, echoing the details you provided. This consistency makes their testimony seem more credible. It's no longer the scattered, chaotic ramblings of a few hysterical girls. It's a unified chorus of witnesses, all singing from the same hymn sheet you wrote. And for the accused, your confession creates a terrifying template for survival. Word quickly spreads through the jails of Essex County. Denial leads to the gallows, but confession leads to life. A wave of confessions follows yours. But these are not simple admissions of guilt. They are elaborate stories modeled directly on your original narrative. Suddenly, dozens of people are describing their own encounters with the man in a black coat. They confess to riding on poles, attending witches' sabbaths, and being forced to sign the black book. A teenage girl, named Deliverance Hobbs, confesses and gives a vivid description of the witches' sacrament in Salem village, complete with a dark minister and diabolical deacons, a story that sounds remarkably like the one you told your interrogators in Boston. You have inadvertently created a new genre of literature, the Salem confession narrative. It has specific tropes and required elements, all originating from your initial testimony. To be a believable confessor, you had to include the book, the threat of violence from the devil, and the naming of other witches. This is where the tragedy deepens. People, seeing the gallows looming, begin to confess and accuse their own friends and family members. A man named William Barker Sr. confesses to being a witch and provides a sweeping, grandiose vision of a satanic plot to destroy New England, claiming hundreds of witches are part of the conspiracy. His confession, and others like it, are built upon the foundation you laid. They take your story and amplify it, adding their own desperate flourishes. The hunt for the 6 other names you mentioned has exploded into a search for hundreds. The fear you helped to quantify has become infinite. One of the most peculiar and chilling aspects of this blueprint is the role of what historians call the confessing circle. A group of women, including Deliverance Hobbs, her stepmother and others, become serial confessors. They are arrested, they confess, and then they become star witnesses for the prosecution, just like you. They are moved from jail to testify against others, their confessions granting them a strange, protected status, turning state's evidence to save their own necks. This creates a terrifying self-perpetuating machine of accusation and confession. Every new confession proves the reality of the conspiracy and leads to more arrests. Every new arrest creates more pressure on the accused to confess and name others. It's a pyramid scheme of fear, and your testimony is the business plan it's based on. Did you ever intend for this to happen? Almost certainly not. Your goal was singular and selfish: to survive. You likely never imagined that your personal survival strategy would be codified into a system that would condemn so many others. You sit in your cell and hear the echoes of your own words coming back to you, twisted and magnified in the mouths of others. You hear how the yellow bird you described is now seen by everyone, a constant fluttering harbinger of doom. You hear how the black book has become the central focus of every interrogation. You created a monster to save yourself from being eaten, but the monster got loose. It is now rampaging through the countryside, devouring everyone it finds. And it speaks with your voice. You are spared the gallows, but you are forced to watch as the fire you started consumes your world. The blueprint for fear was a map to your own survival, but it has become a death warrant for countless others. The weight of that knowledge must be a heavier burden than any chains the jailer could place on you. The legal machinery that you helped to set in motion grinds on, and at its core is the terrifying, unlegally dubious concept of spectral evidence. Your story of your spectre flying through the night, of Sarah Goods and Sarah Osborne's spectres tormenting you, gave the magistrates the precedent they needed. They now fully embrace the idea that a person's spirit could leave their body, travel to another location, and inflict harm. This is the key that unlocks the door to mass condemnation. In a normal court of law, you need evidence. You need a witness who saw the accused commit the crime, or you need physical proof. But in the special court of Oyer and Terminer, established in June 1690 specifically to handle the witchcraft cases, the primary evidence is spectral. The courtroom becomes a theater of the absurd. A girl like Abigail Williams will be sitting on the witness stand, and suddenly she will scream and contort her body. I see Goody Proctor's spirit on the beam. She will cry out, pointing to an empty spot in the rafters. She is pinching me. She is trying to make me sign the book. The accused, like John Proctor or Rebecca Nurse, stand helpless. How do you defend yourself against something no one else can see? John Proctor famously and angrily retorted, "There is another judgment, dear child," trying to appeal to a higher, divine justice. But in this room, the only justice is what the girls claim to see. Your confession is the legal bedrock for all of this. The magistrates reasoned Tituba, a confessed witch, admitted to sending her spectre out to do the devil's work. Therefore, it is a proven fact that witches can do this. Now, when the afflicted girls claim to see other specters, their testimony is considered valid. You, in your bid for survival, accidentally legitimized the very tool that will be used to hang 19 people and cause the deaths of several others in prison. The power of this spectral evidence is absolute. It overrides all other forms of testimony. Dozens of neighbors might sign a petition attesting to the good character of someone like Rebecca Nurse, describing her as a pious, God-fearing woman. But all it takes is for one of the afflicted girls to scream that Rebecca's spectre is tormenting them, and the petition becomes worthless. The unseen world has become more real, more legally binding, than the physical one. This is a point of intense debate among legal historians. Why did the magistrates, many of whom were educated men, embrace such a flimsy and dangerous form of evidence? Some argue it was pure religious zealotry. They genuinely believed they were at war with Satan, and in a spiritual war, spiritual evidence must be valid. Others point to political motivations. The colony was in a state of turmoil. Its charter had been revoked, and a decisive, powerful response to a crisis might have been seen as a way to assert authority. There's also a theory that the magistrates felt they had no choice. Your confession, so vivid and complete, had painted them into a corner. If they were to deny the validity of spectral evidence, they would have to deny the truth of your entire story. And if your story wasn't true, then what was the explanation for the girls' torments? They had invested too much in your narrative to back out now. From your cell, you hear the news of the first trials. Bridget Bishop, a flamboyant and somewhat disreputable tavern owner, is the first to be tried and condemned. The evidence against her is a mix of old gossip about her bewitching pigs and, most damningly, fresh spectral evidence from the afflicted girls. They claim her spectre flew into their rooms at night and attacked them. It's a direct echo of the stories you told. You are not present at these trials. You are kept away, a living but sequestered source. But your ghost is the star witness in every single one. The power of your story has taken on a life of its own. It no longer needs you to tell it. It is told through the mouths of the girls, and it is validated by the authority of the court. You won the battle for your own life, but in doing so, you helped create the weapon that would lead to a slaughter. The spectral evidence you unleashed is like a poison gas, invisible and deadly, seeping into every corner of the community, choking the life out of reason and justice. You are watching a fire you started, a fire fueled by ghosts only you taught them how to see. From the relative safety of your prison cell, the world you left behind descends into madness. You are a spectator now, watching from a distance as the fire you accidentally helped to light begins to rage out of control. News filters in through jailers, other prisoners, and the official visitors who still occasionally come to consult you, the oracle of this chaos. Each piece of news is a fresh horror, a new testament to the power of the story you told. On June 10th, you hear that Bridget Bishop has been hanged on Gallows Hill. She is the first. Her death marks a terrible turning point. This is no longer a matter of accusations and examinations. The state has now officially sanctioned the killing of people based on the spectral evidence you helped to legitimize. The theoretical has become brutally real. You remember Bridget, a woman known for her red bodice and her sharp tongue, a person who lived on the fringes just as you did. Did you feel a pang of guilt or just the cold, hard relief of a survivor? The human mind in extreme circumstances is a strange and complex thing. It's possible to feel both at the same time, the horror of the consequences and the primal gratitude that it isn't you. Then, 5 more are hanged in July, including the respected Rebecca Urson, the Defiance era Good. You remember Sarah Good from that first day, the beggar who cursed under her breath. On the gallows, she showed no remorse. When the Reverend Nicholas Noyes urged her to confess, she reportedly yelled, "You are a liar. I am no more a witch than you are a wizard, and if you take away my life, God will give you blood to drink." It's a moment of incredible defiance. The last act of a woman who refused to play their game, and her death warrant was effectively co-signed by you. You had named her. You had confirmed their suspicions. While others provided the spectral evidence in court, your initial accusation was the foundation upon which it was all built. The absurdity of the situation deepens. The court, in its zeal, is devouring its own. John Proctor, a prosperous farmer and tavern keeper who had been an outspoken critic of the proceedings, is accused and arrested. His crime doubting the accusers. He called the afflicted girls jades and wenches and suggested they should be whipped. For this skepticism, his entire family is targeted. He is hanged in August, pleading his innocence to the very end. You are watching your own story play out, but with a new and ever-changing cast of characters. Each new act is more horrifying than the last. You provided the script, and now they are performing it with a deadly seriousness you could never have imagined. The intellectual and theological justifications for the trials, once a matter for sober debate among ministers, are now twisted to fit the escalating panic. The influential minister Cotton Mather, a man who believed deeply in the reality of the invisible world, publicly supports the court's work. He sees the trials as a necessary battle against the forces of Satan. However, even he expresses some private anxiety about the over-reliance on spectral evidence. It's a fine line he and others try to walk, but their support, however qualified, gives the court the theological cover it needs to continue. The very idea that a man like Mather was wrestling with the finer points of spectrum evidence while people were being hanged is a historical controversy that scholars still dissect. Was he a reluctant supporter pushed along by events, or a key enabler of the tragedy? From your cell, you are shielded from the direct horror, but you are also trapped with the knowledge of your role in it. It must be a unique and terrible kind of torment. You are not a killer, but your words have become weapons in the hands of others. You are not a liar in the conventional sense, as you were coerced, but the lie you told has taken on a life of its own, becoming a monstrous truth. You are the first domino. You were pushed and you fell. But as you fell, you knocked over Sarah Good and Sarah Osborne. They in turn knocked over Bridget Bishop and Rebecca Urson John Proctor. Now the dominoes are falling so fast and so furiously that no one can stop them. You can only sit in the quiet of your cell, listening to the terrible, cascading sound of their fall, knowing that it all started with you. The survival you fought so hard for has come at a cost you are only now beginning to understand. The chaos you are witnessing from afar feels both intimately connected to you and terrifyingly separate. You are the author of a book that everyone is reading, but they are all writing their own unauthorized sequels. A deep, unsettling mix of feelings must be churning within you. There is the profound, animal relief of being alive. Every day you wake up, not on a hangman-esque cot, but in a jail cell, is a victory. But this relief is surely tainted by a creeping, complex emotion that has no single name. It is a cocktail of guilt, fear, and a strange, detached horror. You hear about the fates of the two women who were first named alongside you. Sarah Osborne, the reclusive woman with the inheritance dispute, never even makes it to trial. She dies in the squalid conditions of the Boston jail in May, a frail woman broken by the cold, the stress, and the accusations. Her death is a stark reminder of your own mortality, of the fate you so narrowly escaped. Then there is Sarah Good, the defiant beggar, hanged in July. Her story becomes entwined with an even more horrifying one, that of her daughter Dorcas. Little Dorcas, only 4 or 5 years old, was also accused. The magistrates, in their relentless pursuit of the conspiracy, interrogated the child until she too confessed. She likely told them what she thought they wanted to hear, perhaps implicating her own mother to stop the terrifying questioning. She was imprisoned for months. And the trauma was so severe that, according to her father, she was never the same again, suffering from mental distress for the rest of her life. This is the fruit of the tree you planted. You told a story to save yourself, a single adult. But that story has now grown so monstrous that it is devouring children. As the weeks turn into months, you see the true, awful power of your narrative template. It isn't just saving the lives of those who confess, it's also becoming a tool for settling old scores. The accusations are no longer just aimed at the marginalized. They are used to target people over land disputes, business rivalries, and personal animosities. The Putnam family, one of the most powerful and aggressive accusers in the village, seems to be systematically targeting families and individuals who oppose them in local politics, particularly those connected to the rival Porter family in Salem town. The hysteria has become a convenient cover for greed and revenge. Someone covets a neighbor's prime piece of farmland, accuse them of witchcraft. Someone holds a grudge from a decade-old lawsuit, accuse them of sending their specter to torment your child. Your supernatural tale has become a weapon in the most worldly of conflicts. This is a point that historians, particularly those with a more economic or sociological view, emphasize. They argue that the Salem crisis cannot be understood without looking at the deep social and economic fissures that already existed in the community. The witchcraft was the language they used, but the conflict itself was about land power and status. Your story provided the perfect, sanctified vocabulary for these earthly battles. The question of whether the accusers consciously used the crisis for personal gain or were genuinely convinced of their own righteousness is still a subject of intense academic debate. You are watching your fiction being weaponized in ways you could never have foreseen. You wanted to save one life, your own. But your story is now being used to ruin dozens of lives, to settle scores, to seize land, to destroy families. Does a part of you feel a sense of grim irony? You, the ultimate outsider, have provided the ultimate insider tool. Your story, born of powerlessness, has become the ultimate instrument of power for families like the Putnams. You are safe. Yes, you are alive. But you are also a prisoner of the very story that set you free. You are inextricably linked to every new accusation, every new family torn apart. The guilt must be a constant, low hum the background noise of your survival. You sit in your cell, a survivor in the middle of a graveyard you helped to create, wondering if the fire you started will ever burn itself out. For months, the fire raged through the lower and middle ranks of Salem society. But a fire, if not contained, will always spread upwards. And in the late summer and early autumn of 1692, the accusations begin to target the elite. The afflicted girls, emboldened by their incredible power and unchecked by the magistrates, start naming people who were previously thought to be untouchable. The wife of the Reverend John Hale, a respected minister from nearby Beverly who had been an early supporter of the trials, is accused. This gives Hale a sudden and profound shock of perspective. When the target was a beggar or a slave, the threat was abstract. When it is your own wife, the injustice becomes terrifyingly personal. He would later become one of the first and most important critics of the proceedings, his change of heart a direct result of the fire reaching his own doorstep. Even more audaciously, accusations are whispered against Lady Mary P. Hipps, the wife of the Royal Governor of Massachusetts himself, Sir William P. Hipps. This is an incredible gamble on the part of the accusers. To accuse the governor's wife is to challenge the very seat of power in the colony. This upward spread of accusations is a classic sign that a moral panic is about to collapse under its own weight. As long as the victims are marginalized and powerless, the elite can support the purge. It reinforces social order. But when the mechanism of accusation becomes so indiscriminate that it threatens the elite themselves, they suddenly have a vested interest in shutting it down. You hear these rumors in your jail cell. They must sound both terrifying and perhaps hopeful. The machine you helped build is finally overreaching. The monster is trying to devour its own masters. This is the moment when the people in charge, who had been content to let the trials run their course, begin to have serious second thoughts. The accusations against the wealthy and powerful, like the merchant Philip English and his wife, also introduce a new, ugly element: the seizure of property. When the Englishes are accused, the sheriff, George Corwin, a relative of the magistrate, seizes their vast estate and liquidates their assets, long before they are ever convicted of a crime. It becomes clear that the witch hunt is not just about piety, it's also about profit. This blatant corruption further erodes public support for the trials. This issue of property seizure is a complex one that historians still puzzle over. Under English law, a convicted felon's property was forfeit to the crown. However, the sheriff's actions in seizing property before a conviction were legally questionable at best. It suggests that the local authorities were either acting out of greed or were so certain of the accused's guilt that they saw due process as a mere formality. The extent to which economic motives drove the later stages of the trials is a hot topic of debate. From your vantage point, you see the logical, insane conclusion of the system you described. If the devil is truly trying to build an army to topple God's kingdom in New England, as your confession suggested, then of course he would try to recruit the most powerful people. The narrative you created almost demanded that the accusations climb the social ladder. You told them the devil was ambitious. Now, they are seeing that ambition play out. The panic has become a victim of its own success. It has become too large, too powerful, too all-consuming. The magistrates and ministers who had fanned the flames now feel the heat themselves. They are beginning to realize that they have created a beast they cannot control, a legal process with no brakes. You can almost feel the tide beginning to turn. The whispers in the jail are changing. Before, they were of fear and new accusations. Now, they are of doubt and discontent. People in the wider community are growing weary of the constant terror, the weekly hangings, the economic disruption. The execution of the Reverend George Burroughs in August was a particular shock. He was a former minister of Salem Village, a Harvard-educated man. He recited the Lord's Prayer perfectly, something which was supposedly unable to do, which deeply unsettled the crowd until Cotton Mather, on horseback, reassured them that the devil could appear as an angel of light. But seeds of doubt were planted. The fire is still burning hot, but for the first time you can hear the faint, distant sound of rain. The end is not yet in sight, but the upward spread of the flames has ensured that the end must come one way or another. The powerful will not allow themselves to be consumed by a fire they started to purge the powerless. The air in Salem on September 22nd, 1692, was heavy and grim. On this day, The machine of death you helped to create performs its last and largest official act. 8 more people are hanged on Gallows Hill. The list of the dead is a testament to how far the madness has spread. It includes Martha Corey, the respectable church member whose only crime was to laugh at the absurdity of the proceedings. It includes Mary Dy, the sister of Rebecca Nurse, who wrote a deeply moving and logical petition to the court, not to save her own life, but to ask that no more innocent blood be shed. Their deaths mark the brutal climax of the hysteria. 19 people have now been hanged. At least 5 others, including Sarah Osborne, have died in prison. 2 dogs have been executed as familiars. The community is exhausted, traumatized, and saturated with blood and fear. The sight of that final, mass execution seems to have been a breaking point for the public conscience. The sheer scale of it was impossible to ignore. The image of 8 bodies swinging from the gallows was a visceral shock that sobered many who had been caught up in the frenzy. This is the moment the machine finally stalls. The momentum that had seemed unstoppable since your confession in March finally begins to wane. The fuel for the fire, public belief and official sanction, is running low. Back in your cell, you are a world away from Gallows Hill, but the news of that day must have felt like the final, terrible chapter of the story you started. You named Sarah Good and Sarah Osborne. The court, following your blueprint, went on to kill 19 more. There is a direct, traceable line from your words in the meeting house to those bodies on the hill. But as the hangings stop, a new phase begins: the quiet, slow, and painful process of backtracking. Governor P. Hips, his own wife now having been whispered against, finally steps in decisively. In October, he orders a halt to the proceedings of the Court of Oyer and Terminer. He forbids any more arrests and, most critically, he bars the use of spectral evidence in any future trials. He basically throws out the entire legal framework that your testimony had helped to build. The key you gave them to unlock the conspiracy has now been thrown away. This decision by Governor P. Hips is a pivotal moment, and his motivations are still debated by historians. Was it the accusation against his wife that finally pushed him to act? Was it pressure from influential ministers in Boston, like Increase Mather Cotton's father, who were publishing tracts arguing against the reliability of spectral evidence? Or was it simply a political calculation that the trials had become too unpopular and were destabilizing the entire combination of all these factors? With spectral evidence banned, the entire case against the remaining prisoners collapses. The afflicted girls' visions are no longer admissible in court. Their power, which had been absolute for months, vanishes overnight. They are once again just teenage girls, no longer the oracles of an invisible world. The great Salem witch hunt doesn't end with a bang, but with a bureaucratic whimper. The special court is dissolved. The remaining prisoners are eventually tried by a new superior court in the following year, and without spectral evidence, most are acquitted. The machine, deprived of its ghost fuel, simply grinds to a halt. For you, this is both a blessing and a curse. The end of the trials means the immediate threat of a wider, ever-escalating slaughter is over. But it does nothing to change your personal situation. You are still in jail. You are a confessed witch. You are the property of Reverend Paris. The world has moved on from the crisis you helped to start, but you are still trapped within its consequences. The first gallows has been torn down, but the walls of your own prison remain, but yours is simply entering a new, quieter, but no less uncertain phase. The silence that descends after the storm is deafening. The panic has subsided, the accusations have ceased, and the public mood is shifting from terror to a deep, collective shame. People are slowly beginning to reckon with what they have done. But while the world outside is changing, your world remains the same for stone walls. The trials are over, but you are not free. And now you make a fateful decision, perhaps emboldened by the changing climate, perhaps simply exhausted by the lie you've been forced to live for nearly a year. You decide to tell the truth. You recant. You find a sympathetic ear, perhaps in a jailer or a visiting official, and you finally tell the story of what really happened. You tell them you were never a witch. You tell them you made it all up. And most importantly, you tell them why. You state, for the record, that your master, the Reverend Samuel Paris, had beaten you. You describe how, in the days leading up to your examination, he had subjected you to relentless, violent pressure to confess. Your confession, you now declare, was not a product of satanic influence, but of your master's physical abuse. My master did beat me and otherwise abuse me to make me confess and accuse, such as he would have me to accuse, you state. This is an incredibly brave and dangerous thing to do. You are a slave accusing your master of a brutal crime. In the 17th century, this is an almost unheard of act of defiance. You are pulling back the curtain on the respectable facade of the Paris household and revealing the violence that lay beneath. Your recantation is a bombshell, but a quiet one. It doesn't create a new public firestorm. Instead, it becomes part of a slow, simmering re-evaluation of the entire affair. For those who are beginning to doubt the trials, your statement is a crucial piece of evidence. It suggests that the very first confession, the bedrock of the entire crisis, was coerced. If the foundation was rotten, then the entire structure built upon it was illegitimate. The historical validity of your claim of being beaten is widely accepted by scholars. It fits perfectly with the known context of master-slave relationships and with Paris's character, which by all accounts was rigid, paranoid, and authoritarian. Your recantation is seen as one of the most important "I told you so" documents of the post-trial era. But your truth-telling has a terrible, immediate consequence. While it may help to posthumously exonerate some of the victims in the eyes of history, it does you no good. In fact, it makes your situation worse. By recanting, you lose your protected status as a repentant, cooperating witness. You are now, in the eyes of the remaining authorities, a liar. You have admitted to perjuring yourself before the court. This makes you untrustworthy and, in a way, even more contemptible than a real witch. You are no longer a valuable asset. You are just a problem, and Reverend Paris, the man you have just publicly accused, is furious. He has been your master, your jailer, and now he becomes your abandoner. He refuses to pay the fees required for your release from prison. In this era, prisoners, even if acquitted or pardoned, were required to pay for their own room and board while incarcerated, their jail fees. If you couldn't pay, you stayed in jail. Paris washes his hands of you. He has no use for a slave who has publicly shamed him and recanted the very confession that briefly made him the center of God's war against Satan. So he leaves you to rot. Your brave act of telling the truth, of trying to set the record straight, has backfired. Your story, the grand, terrifying, life-saving fiction you created, was your shield. Now you have thrown it away, and you are left naked and vulnerable, abandoned by the very man whose cruelty forced you to lie in the first place. You are trapped in a prison of legal limbo, a forgotten footnote in a story you created. The world no longer cares about your truth. They have already moved on. The months drag on. The year turns from 1690 to 1693. The seasons change outside your small barred window, but inside everything is the same. The cold, the damp, the darkness. You are caught in a bureaucratic nightmare, a prisoner of an unpaid bill. You are no longer Tituba, the infamous witch of Salem. You are just another forgotten soul in the Boston jail, one of several left behind after the storm passed. Your master, Reverend Paris, has abandoned you completely. He has his own problems now. His role in fanning the flames of the hysteria has made him a pariah in Salem village. His congregation is turning against him, blaming him for the community's trauma and shame. He is fighting for his job, for his reputation. The last thing he wants is to be reminded of you, the slave who both saved him from the initial mystery and ultimately exposed his brutality. Paying your jail fees would be an admission of some continued responsibility for you. So he does nothing. You wait. Waiting is a unique form of torment. It is a slow erosion of hope. Every day you might expect to hear the jailer's keys turning for your release, and every day they don't. You are in a legal purgatory. You have not been condemned to death, but you have not been granted life either. You are not entirely alone in this. Your husband, John Indian, seems to have been in a similar, though less documented, limbo. He had played a strange role throughout the crisis, sometimes acting as an accuser alongside the girls. perhaps as a way to protect himself and align himself with the powerful. His fate immediately after the trials is as murky as yours, one of the many historical question marks. Did he wait with you as he sold off separately? The records are silent. During this long wait, the world outside is slowly, painfully trying to heal. In January 1697, nearly 5 years after the trials began, the General Court of Massachusetts holds a public day of fasting and repentance. Samuel Sewall, one of the main judges from the court of Oyer and Terminer, stands up in his church in Boston while his minister reads his public confession aloud. He accepts the blame and shame of the trials and prays for forgiveness. It is a stunning public moment, an official acknowledgement that a terrible mistake was made. But this public repentance does little to change your private reality. The apology is for the colony's soul, not for your freedom. You wait as the seasons turn, a living relic of a time everyone else wants to forget. You are a physical reminder of the madness, and they have locked that reminder away in a dark cell. You have become an inconvenient truth. Your very existence brings up uncomfortable questions about coercion abuse and the real origins of the hysteria. The historical record of your time in jail is almost a complete blank. What did you think about during those long months? Did you regret your confession, which saved your life but caused so much destruction, or did you regret your recantation, which was the truth but cost you your freedom, or did you simply focus, day by day, on the primal act of survival, just as you had done in the Paris kitchen and the Salem meeting house? We can only imagine the psychological toll of that long, uncertain waiting. To have been at the absolute center of a historic storm, to have held a strange and terrible power in your hands, and then to be plunged into utter silence and impotence. It is a fall from a height that few have ever experienced. You are no longer the oracle, the storyteller, the survivor. You are just a prisoner, waiting for a fate that is entirely out of your hands. The silence of the jail must have been a stark and terrible contrast to the noise and chaos of the year before. Finally, after what must have felt like an eternity, likely more than a year spent in the limbo of the Boston jail, a resolution comes. It is not an act of justice, nor an act of mercy. It is a business transaction. Someone, whose name is now lost to history, decides to settle your account. This unknown individual pays the £7 owed for your fees. £7 was a significant sum of money at the time, more than half a year's wages for a typical laborer. Why would a stranger pay such a fee? The answer is as grim as it is practical. They were not setting you free. The law at the time allowed for a person to be sold into servitude to pay off a debt. And that is what happens to you. Reverend Paris, by refusing to pay your fees, effectively forfeited his ownership of you. The person who paid your debt to the jailer now became your new master. The jailer's door swings open. You are led out into the light, blinking in the unfamiliar sun. You are leaving the prison, but you are not free. You are simply being transferred from one form of bondage to another. You are, once again, property. The irony is staggering. Your journey has come full circle. You began this story as the property of Samuel Paris. You became, for a brief, terrifying moment, the most influential person in Massachusetts. Your words held the power of life and death. You were the author of a reality that consumed a whole society. And now, after all the chaos, all the terror, all the bloodshed, you end up exactly where you started, as a slave, sold to a new master to cover a debt. This final act of your documented life is, for many historians, the most tragic part of your story. It underscores the ultimate powerlessness of your position. Even after surviving the witch hunt, even after your story became the engine of the entire crisis, you were still constrained by the brutal realities of your social and legal status. You could shape a collective nightmare, but you could not shape your own freedom. Who was this new master? We will never know. The historical record falls silent. After the notice of your sale, your name, Tituba, vanishes from the archives of New England. You disappear from history as suddenly as you burst into it. This disappearance is a source of endless fascination and speculation. What was your life like with this new master? Was he kinder than Paris? Did you live out your days in Boston? A quiet servant with an incredible, secret past. Did anyone in your new household know who you were, that you were the infamous Witch of Salem? Some have theorized that you were bought by someone who was sympathetic, perhaps someone who knew you had been wronged and offered you a relatively peaceful existence. Others speculate that you were simply bought as labor, your past irrelevant to your new owner. There is even a romantic, though completely unsubstantiated, theory that you eventually found a way to escape and return to your homeland, but there is no evidence for any of it. The most likely scenario is the most mundane. You lived out the rest of your life in quiet servitude, your extraordinary story locked away inside you. You are a walking, breathing archive of one of the most bizarre and terrifying episodes in American history, but no one was left to listen. The nightmare was over, and the world had no more use for its oracle. The silence that follows you out of the jailhouse becomes permanent. Years pass. The rob wound of Salem begins to scar over, turning into a story that parents tell their children, a cautionary tale whispered in the dark. The world moves on, but the ghost of what happened lingers, and eventually, the colony makes a formal attempt at reconciliation. In 1711, nearly 2 decades after the trials, the government of Massachusetts passes a bill to formally reverse the attainder on the names of many of the convicted witches. This is a legal act to restore their civil rights and clear their names, at least officially. The bill is passed in response to petitions from the survivors and the families of the victims, who have been fighting for years to clear their loved ones' reputations. The government also offers a sum of money, around £600, to be divided among the claimants as financial compensation for their suffering and the seizure of their property. John Proctor's family receives the largest settlement, £150, a testament to the wealth they lost. But your name is not on the list. You are not among the pardoned. You receive no compensation. While the reasons are complex and speak volumes about your unique position. First, you were a slave. You had no legal standing to petition the court on your own behalf. You could not hire a lawyer or file a claim. You were, in the eyes of the law, not a person who could be wronged, but property that could be damaged. Second, and perhaps more importantly, you confessed. The official apology and compensation were for those who were wrongfully accused and convicted. In the twisted logic of the aftermath, you were not seen in the same light. You had, by your own admission, been a witch. Even though you later recounted, your confession permanently tainted your case. To officially pardon you would be to officially acknowledge that the very first confession, the one that started everything, was alike coerced by violence. It was a truth that the establishment, even in its repentant state, was not yet ready to fully embrace. So while the families of Rebecca and Urson John Proctor fight to restore their honor, you are forgotten. You are not part of the official narrative of redemption. You remain in a historical gray area, not a celebrated victim, but the problematic, complicated source of the whole affair. The fate of Reverend Parris provides a stark contrast. After years of bitter conflict with his congregation, he is finally forced to leave Salem village in 1696. He delivers a tearful, self-pitying farewell sermon, never fully accepting his own culpability. He moves from town to town, his career never quite recovering, and dies a few decades later in relative obscurity. He gets to move on. He gets to have a life after Salem. You, on the other hand, are simply gone. Your final act in the historical drama was your sale. After that, the curtain falls. This stark difference in outcomes is a powerful lesson in the dynamics of power, race, and gender in the colonial era. Parris, the man who beat a confession out of you, gets to fade away. You, the woman who told a story to survive his beating, are sold like a piece of furniture and erased from the record. The historical debate about your legacy continues to this day. Was your confession an act of brilliant, subversive resistance, a way of seizing agency in a situation where you had none, or was it simply the terrified response of a victim? A choice made under duress with no thought of the consequences. The truth is, you can be both. You can be a victim of brutal coercion and a brilliant improviser. You can be a powerless slave and a powerful storyteller. Your story refuses to be simple. It challenges our need to categorize historical figures as either pure heroes or pure villains. You are a survivor, and survival is rarely a clean or simple business. You did what you had to do in an impossible situation. The nightmare that followed was not your creation alone, it was a collective failure. A perfect storm of fear, piety, and social tension. You just happened to be the one standing in the eye of the storm. So what are we left with? A ghost. A story with a beginning and a middle, but no ending. You, Tituba, become a figure of myth more than history. Your silence after 1693 is so absolute that it invites fiction to fill the void. Over the next 3 centuries, your character is resurrected again and again, each time reshaped to fit the anxieties and ideologies of the era. In the 19th century, as America grapples with its history of slavery and racial injustice, you are often depicted as a practitioner of voodoo or obi-or, an exotic and sinister figure whose heathen practices corrupt the innocent Puritan girls. This version of you, popularized by writers and historians of the time, plays into racist stereotypes. It makes you the clear villain, the foreign contagion that infects the wholesome body of New England. It conveniently ignores your recantation and the role of Reverend Parris's abuse. Then comes Arthur Miller's classic 1953 play, The Crucible. Written during the height of the McCarthy era and the Red Scare, the play uses the Salem trials as an allegory for political persecution. In Miller's hands, you are once again from Barbados, and you lead the girls in a forbidden dance in the woods. You confess under pressure, but you are portrayed with more sympathy than in the 19th century versions. You are a victim of the Puritans' repressive hypocrisy, but you are still the catalyst, the one who introduces the forbidden element. Miller, like many before him, takes liberties with the historical record to serve his dramatic and political purpose. This portrayal, more than any other, cements your image in the popular imagination. For millions of high school students who read the play, you are the woman who danced in the woods, the one who started it all. More recently, in the 21st century, writers and historians have tried to reclaim you. Feminist scholars see you as a woman resisting a patriarchal system. Scholars of African and diaspora studies see you as a figure of cultural resistance, using your own folklore as a weapon against your oppressors. Novelists like Maurice Condé Tituba, Black Witch of Salem, have given you a voice, imagining a rich inner life and a triumphant, fictionalized ending for you where you find freedom and power. Each generation remakes you in its own image. You have become a screen onto which people project their own ideas about race, gender, power, and religion. But all of these portrayals, even the sympathetic ones, are based on the same handful of documents from that one terrifying year. They are all attempts to answer the same question that hangs in the silence you left behind: who were you really? The academic debate continues. Historians still argue about your origins. Was the name Tituba even of African or Caribbean origin? Some recent scholarship has suggested it might be a variant of a Spanish or even an English name. Other scholars have painstakingly tried to prove a connection to a specific Arawak tribe in Venezuela. The truth is, we don't know, and we will likely never know for sure. You are a historical puzzle with most of the pieces missing. And that perhaps is the final, tragic irony. Your confession was a masterpiece of vivid, specific detail. You gave the world a story overflowing with imagery: the black book, the yellow bird, the man in the black coat. Your lie was detailed, rich, and unforgettable. But your truth, your life before Salem, your real thoughts, your real fears, your real home is almost as complete blank. The fiction you created to survive has become more real, more lasting than the facts of your own existence. You are a victim not just of the trials, but of history itself, which recorded your performance but discarded the person behind it. So here you stand in the quiet courtroom of history, the final question hanging over you: victim or mastermind? The truth is, you are a paradox, a figure defined by the very question that seeks to define you. On one hand, the case for you as a victim is overwhelming and absolute. You were a slave, a person with no legal rights, considered to be chattel. You were culturally and racially isolated in a community that was deeply suspicious of outsiders. You were physically beaten by your master, a man who held absolute power over your body and your life. You were thrown into a legal system that was already convinced of your guilt, a system where the act of denying a crime was considered proof of that crime. From this perspective, you had no real choice. Your confession was not a strategy, it was a scream of surrender. The only words a person in your position could say to stop the pain and delay a certain death. You were a leaf in a hurricane, swept up and carried along by forces far beyond your control. But then, the historian steps back and looks at the way you surrendered, and the picture becomes infinitely more complex. You did not just say, "Yes, I am a witch." You did not offer a simple coerced confession. You did something far more remarkable. You told a story so detailed, so imaginative, and so perfectly tailored to the fears and beliefs of your audience that it completely captivated them. This is the case for you as a brilliant strategist. You saw the one tiny loophole in their insane system: confessors do not hang. And you didn't just step through that loophole, you blew it wide open, creating a space for yourself to survive within. You gave them the man in the black coat, the 9 names in the book, the yellow bird, the flying sticks. You took their folklore and their theology and you mirrored it back to them, amplified and validated. You didn't just play their game, you learned the rules in an instant and became its most skillful player. You controlled the narrative, turning yourself from a defendant into the state's star witness. It was an act of breathtaking intellectual agility, a performance of a lifetime delivered on a stage where the penalty for a bad review was death. And here's a fascinating, poignant epilogue from the other side. Years later, in 1706, one of the most aggressive of the afflicted girls in Putnam Jr. stood before the Salem village congregation. She was a grown woman now, and she offered a public apology. Her statement, read aloud by the minister, confessed to the delusion of Satan and expressed deep remorse for her role in the accusing of several persons, whereby their lives were taken away. She was the only one of the accusers to ever offer such a public apology. It's a sad, strange coda, a glimpse into the lifelong guilt that some of the other players carried, while you were simply erased. And so the question echoes down through the centuries, a debate that has no final answer because the premise is flawed. The words victim and mastermind are too simple, too binary to contain your truth. You were not one or the other. You were both. You were a victim who, through a stunning act of creative genius, refused to be victimized in the way they intended. You were a mastermind of survival, forced to deploy your intelligence in the most horrific of circumstances. You are the proof that a person can be both powerless and powerful at the same time. Your story is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, but also a chilling reminder of how easily belief can be manipulated, and how a story, once told, can take on a terrifying life of its own. You gave them a key, hoping to unlock your own cage. You could not have known that the same key would be used to lock the doors on so many others, and to open a Pandora's box of fear and death that would haunt a nation for centuries to come. And so our journey with Tituba comes to a close. The echoes of her story, the screams of the accused, and the grim pronouncements of the magistrates all begin to fade. Let the figures of this past world retreat, receding from the foreground of your mind, back into the quiet mists of history where they belong. The man in the black coat dissolves into the shadows of your room. The little yellow bird flies off, its song replaced by the soft, steady hum of the fan, closes its covers for the last time tonight. Feel the edges of the narrative softening now, blurring into the gentle darkness that surrounds you. The weight of this history, of its injustices and its sorrows, is not yours to carry into your sleep. You were just a visitor, a silent observer walking through a world of long ago. And now, it is time to come home, back to the simple, peaceful reality of your own bed, in your own time. Let the sound of my voice become just a murmur, a gentle rhythm that slows with your own breathing. Feel the weight of your eyelids, the release of the small muscles in your face, the gentle pull of slumber. The story is over. It has been told. Now, there is only the quiet, the stillness, and the deep, welcoming peace of the night. Let it all go. Let the current of sleep carry you away into your own dreams, into your own dreams, into your own dreams, into your own dreams. The end of the article. Good night.